Hello, hello, and welcome. Hi all, my name's Gabby Salazar. I'm the organizing director with March for Our Lives. And if you're joining us on the Zoom or on YouTube, thank you so much for being here and being present. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, and we're going to have a great conversation with Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes in just a moment. So thank you all for your patience.
Hi, everyone. Thank y'all for being patient with us as we worked with some stuff. My name is Ariel Hobbs, and I'm the program coordinator for March for Our Lives. And once again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for our virtual discussion on the state of the gun violence epidemic and the impacts gun violence has on youth across the country. And gun violence has continued to rise and rise, and now gun violence is the leading cause of death for young people in the United States. March for Our Lives and our volunteers across the country have worked tirelessly to demand that gun violence prevention legislation be passed. But we need elected officials to work with us. Joining us today on this conversation is Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, who's also a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor. Will you please please share with us a little bit about yourself and your campaign for Senate?
Absolutely. Well, just want to say thank you so much for having me. I want to thank you so much for your advocacy and for your leadership on this most pressing issue. Again, I'm Mandela Barnes, proudly serving as Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, former state representative, and prior to that, I was an organizer. And that's how I got to this position, because of organizing, the very same work that you all are doing, demanding change in communities when we've been denied the opportunity for so long. And the fact that y'all are out here doing this work in spite of what seems like impossible circumstances gives so many people hope, including myself, because we all deserve more. We all deserve better than what we've been getting. We've all been left behind. And if people don't step up, we'll never reach our most full potential. So just want to say thank you so much for everything. And thank you all for having me here today. Really excited to get into conversation.
Oh, wait, I was muted. Thank you. So let's hop right into it. So, Lieutenant Governor, what brought you to this conversation today? I know you kind of touched on that in your intro and in telling us about yourself, but what brought you to this conversation today?
Well, I'll tell you, like way too many people in this country, gun violence is a deeply personal issue for me. I know the pain of losing people on multiple occasions. I was about your age when I lost my very first friend to gun violence, and I lost more than I care to count since that moment. And this is a pain that nobody should have to feel, whether it's at school, grocery store, neighborhood, at all, in general. But I'm here today because I want you to know that I want to fight alongside you, especially in the US Senate, where we don't have enough people who are willing to be bold and take on forces like the gun lobby to enact the change that we so desperately need across this country. I don't want anybody to have to ever experience the pain of losing people to gun violence. Far too many people all across the state of Wisconsin and people all across the entire country have had to deal with this in ways that they never should have. But again, it comes down to a lack of leadership that we are not, or that we've been experiencing, because too many of our elected officials are out of touch with the problems on the ground that people are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. Gun violence has touched everyone. And I think that's something that people don't quite realize about gun violence, and what makes it so special is that it's an issue, it's an epidemic that affects every single person in this country. It's getting to the point with, gun violence being the leading cause of death for young people, that it'll be soon that every family, every person will know someone who's or lost someone to gun violence. But with that, we'll get into the next question. So statistics clearly show this is a huge public safety issue, and public safety and public health issue in Wisconsin. Suicides and homicides make up the most gun deaths in the state. What do you think what are some solutions that you think that can be proposed to address gun violence in Wisconsin?
Well, I just want to say first, thank you for talking about this as a public health issue, because it is, and we need a public health approach. That means common sense. And the common sense gun laws are the things that y'all have already been fighting for. And too many people who are bought and paid for by the gun lobby have fought against every step of the way. I mean, we're talking about background checks on all gun sales, red flag laws. And the additional things that we could and should be doing is closing the loopholes that allow domestic abusers to have guns. We need secure storage laws that keep guns out of the hands of children. That can't even tell you the amount of accidental death or even accidental suicide that we see because children have too easy access to guns. And we also need to repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, which allows gun manufacturers to make our communities more dangerous with impunity. This is an issue of accountability as much as it is an issue of public health, and people need to be held responsible for the carnage and the chaos that happens because of lax laws.
Totally. You spoke a lot about the legislative ask and legislative solutions, but I'm sure as your history as an organizer, you understand that, legislative and organizing go hand in hand in terms of ending the gun violence epidemic. And us here at March for Our Lives, and as a part of our theory of change, believe that gun violence, the solutions to gun violence go beyond just the legislative, and really should get to addressing the root causes of gun violence. Why is it critical to take this holistic approach when it comes to solving the gun violence epidemic?
I mean, just like most other issues, you can't just attack it on the surface. If you just go in the yard and cut the tops off of weeds in the lawn, more are going to grow back. You got to pull it up by the roots. When my granddad moved to Milwaukee after World War II, it was the best place for a Black family. He got a job as a steel worker. That was his career for 30 plus years. That gave our family a solid foundation. But when companies like the one that my granddad worked for closed the doors, moved jobs overseas, we saw economic opportunity dry up. And that's when communities just like mine saw a rise in crime and a rise in violence because people became more desperate. By the time I came along, the zip code where I was born was one of our most impoverished in the entire state and the most incarcerated in the entire country. And that is due solely to a lack of opportunity.
Definitely agree. As we've seen recently over the past few months, that gun violence, the very first pieces of gun violence legislation have been passed by Congress in over 30 years. But it shouldn't have taken 30 years to get that legislation passed. So, Lieutenant Governor, what do you believe is the biggest blocker to being able to address gun violence? And what are your plans to prioritize and address this issue if you are elected senator?
One of the biggest barriers we have is out of touch politicians who have all the power in the world to do something but choose not to. We have to address the reason why we haven't had these common sense gun laws, the reason that they've been so inactive, and that's because money in politics. Way too many people in the Senate put the interests of the gun lobby ahead of the lives of our children, the lives of anybody for that matter. And people like one of my senators, Ron Johnson, is bought and paid for, I should say, by the gun lobby. He's taken over $1 million from the NRA. That's why we can't trust people like him to keep us safe. Knowing firsthand the pain of gun violence is how I guarantee you that I will never back down from the gun lobby. And I also do the work to fight to get big money out of politics. I'm proud to be endorsed by organizations like End Citizens United, the leader in the fight for more accountability in our democracy. And that's exactly how we come together to weaken the gun lobby's grip on our democracy.
Agreed. So it's not a secret. There's a very big election coming up this November, well, for you in a few weeks, but this November as well. And over the past couple of election cycles, we've seen the youth voter turnout rise and rise. Wisconsin has an above average youth voter registration at 68%. And the state historically is a high turnout state. How do you see young people being the leaders to bring change and end gun violence in this country?
Well, people ask me all the time, what gives me hope? I always tell them it's the next generation. The people in your generation, y'all are the leaders that we need to address the big problems we face. And unfortunately, the problems that have been ignored by the generations before ours, by too many people, I should say, in the generation before us. I won't say the whole generation. And it's always a shame, too, when problems feel like they're all left for you to solve. I am here to tell you that you are not alone in this work, and I want to work with you to bring about the change that we need. And I can tell you that you all have already moved mountains because of your advocacy work. When I'm asked how we get young people to show up, my answer is very simple every time. And that's that we need to show up. We show up in every community. We meet people where they are and we organize. That's the work that y'all are doing every day. And I want you to remember that you're the most influential people in the lives of your friends and the lives of your family members. Those one-on-one conversations, the canvas shifts, the phone calls, that's where it all happens. That's where change begins. That's how you win elections. And that's exactly what we need this year to elect the majority of people who actually get what's happening and who are ready to fight for better.
Agreed. You've actually already kind of touched on this for our last question, but what can you tell young people to provide a sense of hope that we can overcome these problems that we did not create?
Well, as community organizers, you're the engine that keeps the democracy, that keeps our democracy going. I do, however, know how discouraging the work can be when you face problems that seem insurmountable, when people who should be responsive decide to ignore you. I was an organizer before I ever ran for office. I still feel like an organizer at heart. But what I think about when things feel impossible is the fact that bad things tend to happen when good people stand by. And good things only happen when we all come together. And one of the last pieces I'll say is that you should run for office. That was the reason I ran for office in the first place. I was frustrated. I was tired of the way that things were going. And I felt deeply enough, if things weren't going the way that they should be going, I could get mad or I can get elected. And I decided to run for office. And I kept organizing and we made it happen.
Okay. And just because that was our last question, but I'm going to give you the floor. If there's anything that you would like those listening and watching to know about you, to hear about you, or about your campaign and what you plan to do if you're elected senator, you have the floor.
Of course. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, but more importantly, for the work that happens outside of this Zoom meeting, showing up in places, challenging the status quo, challenging politicians that ignore you, challenging a system that leaves too many people behind. If people are interested in the campaign, and go to mandelabarnes.com. We need all the help we can possibly get. We want you engaged, we want you active, and we want you a part of this movement. And this race is about rebuilding the middle class because it goes back to those core issues, those root causes that prevent crime from happening in the first place. I truly believe that we don't have to settle for things the way that they are. And the fact that y'all are here today, the fact that you do this work is proof that you all believe the same thing. So that's why it's important for us to band together, to stand strong and change the way things have been done. But it won't happen on its own. It's happening because of the work that you're doing. And it will only continue to happen if we all push forward with each other.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, for giving us, a slice of time in your incredibly busy schedule, I'm assuming. And thank you to all of us for joining us today for this very important conversation. With firearms being the leading cause of death for youth, the stakes are too high to not do something this election cycle. Join us and pledge to vote by texting pledge to 954-954. Again, texting pledge to 954-954 or clicking the pledge link that is in the chat right now. I thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.